Advancing the cause of liberty takes more than just coming up with ideas. It means making them happen. This is Society and the State. Life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
Well, hello there for episode 63. Welcome, everybody. This is Connor Boyack, one of your two co-hosts, and I'm actually flying solo on this episode because we are here in Utah, where we operate in the middle of our legislative session. In our state, it's a 45-day legislative session, calendar days, so just, work days, weekdays, it's end up being fewer than that. And our organization, like many others, is up at the Capitol full-time, lobbying, advocating, persuading, and so forth. Now, before we do that, every year, our organization partners with another to launch what we call a PreLegislative boot camp. And this is an opportunity where we reach out to the public and help educate them on how the system works and then how they can influence the system, how they can make a difference, how they can take their idea and make it law. It's a very popular event. We always have several hundred people come out to that. We have legislators and media and lobbyists come speak. And it's very illuminating for the public to learn how the sausage is made. So I thought that being in the middle of our legislative session, when admittedly our number of episodes we're churning out slows down a little bit because of how busy we are, I wanted to take a quick moment and offer some ideas, some tips about how you, dear listener, can lobby in your pajamas, as the title is called. Now, obviously, the more effective you are, the less likely you are to be doing it in your pajamas. But really, the point here is that anyone, anywhere, can lobby. The first and important thing is to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. So I find that a lot of people rely on, aggregated news websites to be monitoring what's going on. But let me tell you, having been in many of these meetings in which reports are issued in the newspaper or TV about what happened, if we're lucky, 10 or 20% of what happened in that meeting, what was discussed, the substance, makes it into the report. I'd say usually it's like 5%. And that's not to say they're intentionally manipulating things and they're trying to, dumb the public down. It's just that, they're, technologically and logistically unable to convey to the public the full ramifications and events and circumstances that happen. And so recognize that on the first hand, you're missing out, right? If you're just going off of what the news says, you're not getting the full picture. Now, oftentimes a reporter, though admittedly being unable to give the full picture, is at least giving a summary. They're trying to at least be fair in representing what happened, even if they're not getting down to the nitty-gritty or they're covering everything of he said, she said. They at least try to convey the overall, summary results. And usually that's the case. Although I have found, having been both on the side of witnessing things and also behind the scenes in driving policy and driving the events that are being reported on, I find that sometimes, yes, you do see things that are completely omitted. Very rarely do I find, intentional manipulations or intentional omissions, but usually you have things that simply don't make it into the press at all, even though they are important and that they happen. So if you want to lobby in your pajamas, as it were, if you want to make a difference remotely from at home, limited time, the first thing is you have to go to the source. You have to find information that is pure. Now, the best way to do that, if you're following your state's legislative session, if you're tracking a bill that's important to you, whether it's good or bad, is to try and follow the discussion. Watch the discussion. Stream the committee meetings online if you cannot attend. Try and talk to the people who are there up at the Capitol who perhaps were in that meeting. Try and get better information, because I find that a lot of times when people are trying to influence things, if they don't have the full information, then their persuasion is much less effective, and a legislator or an elected official is much less likely to, take heed as to what they say. Does that make sense? Right? Because we'll find people who are well-meaning and thinking that they're, getting involved and making a difference, and they send an email to their legislator, but they don't really understand the full picture. And it creates this division between elected official and constituent, where the elected official begins to almost subconsciously think, well, they don't have the full information. They don't get it. They don't understand. So I'm just not going to pay attention to this. And maybe they'll pop off a cordial reply, but it doesn't actually persuade them, because in the back of the lawmaker's mind, they're thinking, well, if only they knew, then they would agree with me. So the important part about lobbying, the important part about making a difference and persuading someone is that you need to understand. You need to understand who's saying what. You need to understand what happened in the committee meeting. You need to understand what's going on so that you can have an informed opinion and thereby be much more likely to persuade the elected official. So you can't rely on aggregated websites. You can't rely on commentaries and Facebook friends, right? To the extent possible, if there's one, like let's say your issue is firearms, right? Go review all the past things that have happened in the past 3 years in your state on firearms. What bills have been run? Who are the legislators that are really tuned into this? Talk to the NRA lobbyist or whatever. Do a little bit of due diligence so that you can get the full picture. Because once you understand, then you are going to be in a much better position to be able to persuade. This is something I see time and again, that the public is just reading the newspaper or the online article about what happened, and then they fire off a missive to the legislator. Oh, well, you should do this, or oh, hey, great, appreciate you doing this. And they don't really understand. And so it's a missed opportunity, right? Because here's a person who's taking time out of their day to try and reach out, to try and communicate or persuade, but they're not as effective as they could be because they don't fully understand. So recognize that it's inadequate to just read summary articles about what happened. If your state has it, most do have open meetings laws and record these meetings and stream them online, right? Pay attention to what's going on. Watch the actual discussions. Get the legit, factual information about what's happening. Try and get the full picture. Once you have the full picture, then what? Well, from there, I think the next most important thing you can do is to have dedicated time. A lot of people have these very cyclical involvement cycles, I guess you can call them, right? Voting is key, right? Oh, I got my sticker and I voted, and then people go back to sleep. They think that they fulfilled their civic duty and, they're done. And okay, wake me in a year or 2 years, and then I'll do my civic duty again. For people who are a little bit more active or willing to be active, I think they also have this cyclical burnout where they'll get involved, they'll send a couple emails, and then they'll do nothing else. And so if you want to make a difference, if you want to be an effective lobbyist in your pajamas remotely, you're busy, you're at work, whatever, consistency is key. Why? It's because if you want to persuade your legislator or a city councilman or whoever, you need to be a presence, not an anomaly, right? Because the person who randomly emails once and then you never hear from them again, that's an anomaly. They're easily discarded. The legislator or whoever, the elected official knows that person's going to go back to sleep, right? Like if only I weather the storm here of this nasty email I get, if I just ignore it, that person will go away. So if you don't want to be perceived that way, if you don't want to go away, you have to be consistent. You have to be a presence. You have to be someone that when you email them, they recognize your name. They know that you're not going away. They know that you're watching. And they know that perhaps you have a little bit of a soapbox, or people, or, you're a constituent and lots of other constituents that you're going to talk to about that issue or that politician. So it's important to be consistent, right? If your legislative session is like ours, where it's short, just try and recognize maybe you want to spend, an hour a day or a few hours a week doing this stuff, and just reach out, right? Consistently reach out. Now, the important thing is to understand why lobbying works, because if you want to lobby remotely, we have to talk about why lobbying is so effective. People conjure these images of lobbyists of being these, dark room, back room, smoke-filled, cigar and ha-ha and trading money. And, clearly that happens more so in some states, probably more so federal versus states. At the end of the day, the reason why lobbyists are so effective, it's because of relationships, right? And so if a lobbyist has known a legislator for 20 years, that creates an affinity. That lawmaker, that politician, is much more likely to do what that person suggests to them or asks them to do because they're friends, because they know each other, because they get along well together, because the lobbyist went to the politician's fundraiser or sent his kid a birthday present, right? These types of things. Now, while some of those may sound ethically problematic or repugnant, especially if you're doing it with the sole purpose of trying to, buy votes, and so it's this coordinated campaign to please politicians so that you're on their good side and thereby can, make sure they are compliant for your issues. there's like any tool, there's a good and a bad here, right? It's like a firearm. You can use it for good purposes. You can use it for bad purposes. There are plenty of negative ways to lobby. And much of what I just said has this negative aura around it for, legitimate reason. However, there's a good way to lobby. And that's really, it comes down to relationships. If in my case, my state senator and my state representative are supposedly representing me, I want them to know me. I want them to know my issues. I want to be on a first name basis. I want them to not hate me, right? Because if I reach out to them, I want them to do what I say. I want them to listen. I want them to act accordingly to what I am suggesting they do. The best way to do that, basic human psychology here, right? If someone hates you, they're not going to do what you ask them. If someone loves you, sure, they'll do what you ask them. That's all it comes down to. You have to have a good relationship. You have to have a relationship, period. So if you want to lobby in your pajamas, it's not enough to be a presence and email them periodically and, tweet at them or whatever. That's important. And if that's all you can do, great, because you're light years ahead of the person who just fires off a nasty email once in a while. But if you want to level up your game, you have to have a relationship. And by far the best way I have seen to do it is this. It's very simple, okay? Let's use our case right now, because Utah, here in our state, we're in the middle of the legislative session. So people say, oh, how can I be more influential? How can I make a difference? I say, don't bother right now, because things are insane and politicians are busy. Wait until the summer. Wait until things die down. We're no longer in the legislative session, right? Legislators here in our part-time legislative state, they go back to their jobs, families, lives, and so forth. So just wait until the summer and then call up this politician, explain you're a constituent, maybe thank them for a vote or two that you liked in the past legislative session. Again, this is all about relationship building. You give someone a compliment. Basic human psychology means they're going to have more affinity and desire to be around you because you said something nice about them. Be sincere, right? Just say, oh, hey, I was watching some of your votes. I really appreciated how you said X, and how great that was. Hey, Mr. Politician, I was wondering if I could take you out to lunch in the next few weeks and chat you up about some of the issues that I've been watching that I think you might find of interest. That's it. Take them out to lunch. Basic social event. Let them get to know you. You're now on a first name basis. You again compliment them on the stuff where you agree. You could even bring up some respectful disagreements and say, I just want you to know where I'm coming from. And, I agree with a lot of what you do. I did find it, a bit worrisome to do this or when you did that. But, overall, I'm liking what you're doing. Or maybe that's not the case, right? The whole point here is to get on a first name basis. And if you got to bite your tongue and only have one compliment, use only the one compliment if the other 99 things you hate, right? The whole point here is to get a relationship, get on a first name basis, take them out to lunch, ask them what their priorities are, learn about them, right? Well, how did you get into public service and why did you decide to run? Tell me what a day of a politician is like during the legislative session, or, what's a city council meeting like? What really goes on behind the scenes? I'd love to kind of understand your perspective and let them talk. Politicians love to talk, right? Okay, so you get the relationship. You take them out to lunch. Easy. Anyone can do that. And especially if that politician knows that you are someone who has a presence, they're much more likely to do it, right? Because if you're an anomaly and you're just this random constituent, ain't no one got time for you. But if you're a presence and they know you're watching and they know you're talking to other constituents or delegates or whatever, they're much more likely to want to engage with you and be on your good side. So take them out to lunch. And then, give it a month, give it 2 or 3 months. Later in the fall, have a cottage meeting at your house. Gather a few politically minded neighbors. They don't have to be like-minded, but they're all constituents, right? And just say, hey, I'm going to have, 20 people over to my house for this cottage meeting. We'll have light hors d'oeuvres, whatever. I'd love for you to come speak for half an hour and talk about some of your priorities and answer some questions. Could you give me a few dates that work? And again, that politician loving to talk and loving to build relationships with their constituents, loving to be on their good side, he's going to give you a few dates that work. And then you schedule something and you put out word and you get people at your house. Suddenly you are kind of the leverage point, the focal point for the relationship between that politician and those constituents. That politician knows it's not just you and you're not an anomaly. You can rally people. You can get a group together. You can put out the word. You are suddenly someone who's not only on a first name basis, but you've leveled up. Okay. This is the easiest formula I've found for the average citizen to get involved, to get a relationship, and to better be able to lobby and persuade their elected officials. Okay? Take them out to lunch, hold a cottage meeting. The end. And then later on, you can cash in on that relationship. So a year, 2, 5 years later, you're in a legislative session and something nasty is coming up, or you want your elected official to run a bill for you or take an idea and make it law, okay? He or she is now much more likely to do as you ask, to represent their constituent with pride because you're such an important, part of the community, whatever, right? The whole point here is being effective with limited time from home. A lot of people will send in form letters, and I'm often asked, are those effective? Absolutely not, right? All those form letters just go into an email inbox with a filtering rule, and they all land in an email box. And if you're lucky, they're read by an intern, maybe, right? You got to be authentic. You got to have a relationship. You want the legislator to tell their intern or their staff member, hey, if you get an email from this guy, let me know. If we get a letter from him or if whatever, let me know. A lot of legislators are great with texting, right? So when you're taking the legislator out to lunch, say, hey, I'd love to be able to text you from time to time during the legislative session or the city council meetings if something comes up. Would that be okay with you? And they'll say yes. And now you're on a, texting basis with that lawmaker. You're watching something online and some issue's coming up. You can text that legislator and say, hey, what do you think about this? Is this on your radar? Please make sure to vote against this. Here's why. It all comes down to the relationship. That's why the big, wealthy, fat cat, corporate lobbyist, whatever, it's why they're all effective. It's because they've nurtured a relationship. Some of them for perhaps, problematic purposes and in problematic ways. But like any tool, again, there are good ways to do it. There's a good way you can do it. This is how you lobby in your pajamas. It requires a little bit of work because you got to go after the factual information and not rely just on reporters with limited time and limited awareness and understanding of the issue to then report it to you. You have to dig. You have to spend a little time going after the information that you value, that matters to you. Okay, so go after the truth. Ask around, research, listen to meetings, go to meetings. You got to do your due diligence. And then you got to build a relationship. From there, you don't have to be in all the meetings. You now have an emissary. You now have people in those meetings that you can just communicate your ideas to, and you're going to be that much more influential and persuasive because you have that relationship. And that legislator can say, oh yeah, my constituent alerted me to this. I'm going to go to this meeting, or I'm going to vote against this. You got to have a relationship. That's really all it boils down to. Now, there's so many ways to level up from there, tips and tricks, and certainly doing this full time, you're at a completely different level because then you're, juggling 100 plus however many relationships and trying to move a whole bunch of different things. Start small. Don't get overwhelmed. Pick one issue. Start there. Practice what I've said, right? Get involved a little bit. You'll find a little bit of motivation because you'll then have a relationship. You'll see that legislator or whoever listen to you. You can then continue and build and expand. Some of us that do it professionally have been doing it for longer and have had to learn a lot of lessons along the way. But start small. Take it easy. Get the relationship. Take it from there and see where it goes. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. All of us should be lobbying in our pajamas, right? A lot of people perhaps are not so politically minded or they abstain completely from voting. My personal take is whether we're engaged or not, the state is going to continue to march onward. Better for us to be able to influence it, restrain it, try and pass whatever laws we can to protect freedom along the way and minimize the damage that's happening. I see too much carnage happening with all these laws being passed and friends being victimized and people being criminalized. And if we're not going to do it, if you're not going to take action, right, who else is going to? So hopefully these tips have been helpful for you to get involved, make a difference, use your influence, start small, build from there. Guys, this is episode 63. We'll see you next time on Society and the State. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.